Welcome back to the Wellness with Delaney podcast. Today, I have a really exciting guest for you. This is Michaela Wilson. She's the creative content director at one of my favorite brands in the wellness space, Aries Tech. She also manages the Way Forward podcast. If you've listened to my episode on there, that is how we actually became acquainted. If you haven't, go ahead and head to the Way Forward after this and listen to our interview together as well. Michaela, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be a guest on someone else's podcast. Like the roles have been swapped.
I know the roles are reversed and I'm loving it. I love the reciprocity of being able to be on each other's shows. I'm really excited for today's episode. So let's just start super simple because we have people from all journeys of life, all levels of wellness listening to this podcast. So what is EMF?
Okay. So EMF is basically electromagnetic. You'll hear it called electromagnetic frequencies, electromagnetic fields. You'll also hear it called wireless radiation or electromagnetic radiation. There's a lot of different words you'll see kind of popping around. But it's basically the frequencies that are being emitted from your wireless devices, your smart devices, cell towers. It's like how we stay connected. So your Apple Watches, your AirPods on Bluetooth, all of those signals that are being sent, they're referred to as electromagnetic frequencies. And whether or not, they're harmful has been up for debate. And that's kind of where I came in of I'm curious and I really want to know the answer. So we can get into that. But as far as just what they are, just on a very basic level, is basically the frequencies that are used to communicate between all of our smart devices.
Okay, so that hopefully makes people understand it, because I think people hear the word EMF or the acronym EMF and they're like this woo-woo, holistic, whatever, but it's a literal frequency that's been proven to exist. So what would some of the negative concerns around EMF be?
Oh my goodness. So it's so hard to narrow it down, because now that I've done so many podcast episodes, for those who don't know me, I've been interviewing researchers and professionals and wellness advocates and all different types of people around EMF and getting a little bit more insight into, what is it and how is it impacting us? But on a I like to kind of explain it like this. We have these voltage gated calcium channels. And someone explained it to me like this actually one time, and I thought it was a really good metaphor. But basically our voltage gated calcium channels are like our castle walls, right? Our cells are our castle and we're trying to protect it. We're trying to keep toxins from flowing in. And we have these barriers around our cells to help protect them. And what EMFs are basically those battering rams that break down the walls and allow for toxins to flow in. So when I first started learning about EMF, I always kind of related it back to it being an environmental toxin. And that's really how I would talk about it as well. But as I started to learn more and more and start talking to more researchers, I'm like, oh, it's actually the battering ram. That's the only way I could describe it. It's what's opening the cells. It's what's opening the blood-brain barrier to allow environmental toxins to flow in. So one of the things that we, when I talk to researchers, but I also talk to just everyday people who have had really intense experiences with mold. I think you even had talked about your experience with mold on the podcast, but with mold and then with Lyme disease and with mast cell, and there's all these different things that people experience. And part of that kind of comes somewhere EMF comes into play. At some point, they start realizing they're hypersensitive to EMF. They feel their cell phone as it's getting close to their ear, and they can feel the tingles on their fingertips when they're on their computer. And the reason that happens, and what I've learned from all of these different people, and I want to kind of preface this so that people know that I don't really qualify myself as an expert. I am a curious person and I want to know everything there is to know about EMF. But I totally understand that people like to have, they like to hear it from people who have credentials. You know what I mean? They have a medical degree, or they have, this significant background in research or whatever. And I can't say that I have that, but I have talked to a lot of people who do. So the information that I share is really just what I've gathered from talking to these medical professionals, talking to these researchers, talking to these scientists. And Dr. Jill Carnahan, I don't know if you've listened to that episode with her, but she talks about how the reason that we experience that, the reason that we basically we are exposed to mold, we find out we have Lyme disease, and then everything comes to a head all at once. All of a sudden we have symptoms, allergies to everything. We're hypersensitive to EMF. And the reason that is because basically those toxins are being allowed to flow into our cells. And we only have, like, we basically are all born with a bucket capacity of what we can allow before our body starts to shut down and starts to have all of these different types of symptoms. And everybody's bucket of like what we can hold toxic wise is going to be different depending on their genes, which genes are highlighted or dimmed. It's all going to be different. So some buckets might be tiny and some buckets might be really big, and some people might not really even notice EMF for a really long time, and then all of a sudden one day they wake up and they're starting to feel headaches, fatigue, all of these little symptoms that people are starting to correlate back to hypersensitivity, but they were fine yesterday. And that's just because their bucket became full with all the different environmental toxins and started to flow over. So I'm really one of those people where it's like, I don't think that EMF is like the one issue, the only issue. I didn't think that we can sit here and say like food is an issue, like toxic chemicals are an issue, what we spray on our corn and soy is an issue. Like we can talk all day about what's really causing like sickness. But I think with EMF, it plays such a significant role because it's something that we didn't really get to choose. And it's just here all around us all the time. And it's so out of sight, out of mind. And it's hitting our cells all the time and opening up those like communications for toxins to flow in where they shouldn't be. That's a really long explanation.
No, I love it. No, I love it because I think a lot of people hear EMF all the time. It's getting more popular in the mainstream, but a lot of people don't really exactly know what it is. They just know that in some way it's bad. So being able to really understand it, I think, is really important because ultimately that's going to help us make the best decisions moving forward with our lifestyles, with our tech, with how we protect ourselves. Okay, so like you mentioned, it's something that's all around and we don't even really get a say. So I know a lot of people have high-tech homes. They might have their phones, they have computers, but beyond that, there are people with their Alexas, with their robot everything, smart TVs.
Yeah.
And then outside of the home, so like let's say I'm going for a walk outside, I don't even have tech. What would be some common sources of EMF just from living in society?
I mean, the easiest ones are going to be like public Wi-Fi and cell towers. And when, I think a really, really important thing that I learned when I was talking to Dr. Kent Chamberlain, who is the president of the Environmental Health Trust, he basically broke it down like, listen, when we went from 2G to 3G to 4G, like these new bandwidths that are always like, hey, we're like launching 5G and it's so exciting. It's going to be faster. It's going to be better. It's not like we went from 4G to 5G and it's like a 20% increase and a 20% difference. No, every time we change bandwidth, it's 100 times different in frequency. So like, for example, a lot of the long-term studies, I was just having a conversation with someone about this today because they're saying, there's not enough long-term studies around 5G. And it's like, well, 5G hasn't even been around long enough to have long-term studies, but there are long-term studies coming out about like 1G and 2G, 900 megahertz, which is about what we were using when we were using 2G. And granted, they are in animals, so people can have their own opinions about that and what that means. And I'll just put that out there. But they've done research with rats showing an increase in tumors with just a consistent exposure to 900 megahertz, which is back in 2G days. Now at 5G, we're anywhere from 30 to 300 gigahertz, which is 100,000 times different than megahertz. So the difference in bandwidths is really important to note. And the reason it's important to note is that as 5G is deployed, because the wave is faster, it means it's shorter. So that they actually need 5G towers every couple hundred feet in order for it to work optimally. So now we're walking down the street and we're seeing these towers. If you walk down like New York City or even Phoenix, Arizona, I was really surprised by Phoenix, Arizona when I went there. I'm like, I actually looked it up and they have one of the highest amount of 5G towers. I think they even surpassed New York City because they were the one of the states that kind of implemented it first. They were kind of like the trial. They were the guinea pigs. So if you walk down these city streets and you really pay attention, you'll see towers hidden as like palm trees, as like they'll be painted into the walls, like they'll be painted into a building, like they'll look like brick, but it's actually like this giant pole coming out. The other, I think it was a couple weeks ago, we were in Salt Lake City and we had an Airbnb that we rented. And the Airbnb, I guess they hadn't like rolled themselves to be the 5G supplier for the entire neighborhood. It was so ironic that I ended up there. But they had this massive building outside of their house that had all of these 5G towers because, unless telecommunication companies are sharing the tower, then all have like their own tower. So there's like multiple towers. And then it just has like signs everywhere, like warning signs everywhere saying like, don't stand within a certain amount of feet of this, even though it's literally right outside the house. So I just thought that was so funny. But yeah, that is Wi-Fi, and then public Wi-Fi. Like I work in a building here where there's, probably 40 offices, and each office has their own Wi-Fi. So I have all kinds of EMF protection with me here because I always feel super, super lethargic after I leave here. I'm sure the lighting has a lot to do with it as well, but just every single building has their own Wi-Fi and they're all pumping at the same time. So those would be the big ones.
Wow. Okay. So what strikes me, and I could be totally off base, is it almost sounds like these companies are trying to like disguise their cell tower so people don't put up a fight. Is that totally off base?
I've posted about this and I've had like, I've had both reactions. Like a lot of people, their intuition's like, this is sketchy. Why are we trying to hide it? And then we've had people who are like, well, it just makes the city look nicer. So, but even then, in the end, no one really got a choice in the matter. It wasn't like we all voted on this and decided, yeah, let's put 5G tower on our school grounds. Like, I mean, now there are a lot of people fighting against it because they're finding out that this is happening. And then they're like showing up to drop their kids off at school one day and realizing like, oh, they're putting a cell tower up, and then they're fighting it. There's a lot of that happening. But yeah, I can't say for sure what the telecommunication company's, agenda is, but I have my own feelings about it.
Yeah, I'm like, I want to tread lightly. I don't want to end up with like a cease and desist. But like that seems sketchy. Are there any stories of people fighting cell towers and winning?
Oh, for sure. I can't tell you the exact schools, but if you do go, there's two websites that I would recommend. Obviously, the one that I manage, but that's biased. So I'll give you that one first. The Way Forward. We do all kinds of blogs on people successfully fighting cell towers, especially in schools. But I do definitely want to mention the Environmental Health Trust, and it's one that I send people to who struggle with the bias aspect of it, because I understand that it's like, okay, you're giving me this information, but you're also like the manager of this, and you also have an EMF product that you recommend, and people have their own feelings about that, and that's fine. I'm like, go to the Environmental Health Trust. They are like, they have no ties to any companies, no ties to any products, and they are just there to give you unbiased information about EMF. I've interviewed Dr. Kent Chamberlain. You might even reach out to him and have him on here. He's so great. But he what I love about his story is that like he was a biocomputer engineer. So no one understands like wireless radiation more than this person. And he had complete belief that EMF was safe and that wireless radiation was safe, because he was never taught otherwise. Like his entire upbringing in his school was that this was a completely safe. Honestly, he was like, it wasn't even something we talked about. And then he basically was hired by the New Hampshire Commission, so like the state of New Hampshire hired or invited like 9 really, really prominent researchers in all these different areas. So he was the bioengineer, and then they had like a neuroscientist, and they had all different types of people, everyone who would make sense to have as a researcher for EMF. And they asked them to do an unbiased analysis of all of the research that was available on EMF at the time. And he went into that 100% thinking that it was going to be that any of the journals who are saying that EMF is harmful were going to be fringe journals, like nonsense journals. There wasn't going to be that much research that showed it was harmful, and that everything else was going to be like prominent journals. And he was like completely floored by what he found out, because it was completely opposite. He was like, the majority of research are from integral journals and show that EMF causes harm. So you really can't say there's not enough research out there. But I'll also just say about them, I know I kind of got off on a tangent. The Environmental Health Trust has a lot of stories about how they have successfully helped schools, like stop schools from putting up cell towers, and they have a whole system on how to do it. So if you're listening, like my sister literally called me. She lives in Montana. She called me a couple months ago, and she was like, okay, I know that you mentioned something, and my daughter is like, they're going through this right now. Like my daughter is about to get a cell tower put up. And so she went to the board, she used all the Environmental Health Trust stuff and started a petition so hopefully they don't end up putting it up, but she started the petition to stop it from going up. And the Environmental Health Trust has all the resources to help you do it. Because, okay, another really important thing, and I'm a realtor, so I did actually know this, but you can't, so it was written, I can't remember which, I don't think if it was the FCC or whatever it was, some kind of regulatory thing that was written. It was almost like the similar one, which we don't need to get into that topic, but a similar one when they wrote that vaccines couldn't be used. Like, you can't come and sue me for a vaccine that you took, even if your child is significantly harmed from that vaccine. They wrote a very similar type of regulation around EMF, where you cannot fight a cell tower based on health. So if you have like hypersensitivity and you're like getting migraines every day, you can't take that as a source to get that 5G tower taken down or to get it shut off. So one thing you can fight cell towers with is real estate. So you can say, hey, this is going to decrease my property value by this much, and this is what I paid for it. And they can also do that with schools. So they use real estate a lot to help keep the Wi-Fi towers from going up, or the cell towers from going up.
That is so like crazy. I think
Right?
the scariest thing too is like, I feel like in general in EMF, like pharma in general, any company or any like conglomerate of companies that isn't holding themselves accountable for the health impacts they're making on others, I immediately don't trust. I'm like,
Yes.
if you can't back up what you're doing with the real life results, I immediately am a little bit suspicious of you.
Yeah, I
But
100%
okay.
guarantee. Thank you very much.
Yep. Exactly. It's crazy to me. But for those who don't actually know this, why would it be a big deal for cell towers to be in schools with children specifically?
Okay, so children, and I just want to address the like common fight back on this is that there's not enough research around children in regards to EMF. That's clear. It's really hard to do research like that with children because you're putting them in a vulnerable position, but we can use common sense analysis to like look at, okay, we know that it's piercing the blood-brain barrier. We know that it's opening up voltage-gated calcium channels. And we know that children's brains, like their skulls are so much thinner than an adult skull, and their tissues are much more absorbent than adults. So there has a lot of researchers, especially people who are predominantly around child healthcare, really talk about this a lot, because it's like, we know that it's affecting our brains, we know that it's affecting our tissues. We can't imagine what it's doing to our children, because their brains are still developing and their tissues are spongy and they're soaking more things in. So and what's super interesting about this is that the countries that have the most research around EMF, like Russia, I know we don't love Russia right now, but or we have opinions, whatever, but they do have a lot of research around it. We can't deny. France, Italy, I think Australia has some research there. A lot of the ones who have like the most research, they have the most regulations around children. So a lot of schools like in Russia and in Italy, they won't allow Wi-Fi in nurseries, like where children are super young. They won't allow Wi-Fi in schools with children that are under the age of 11 years old. So they have these regulations. And I'm like, that's interesting that the people with the most research are like, let's be more careful with our kids. I really want to mention something that I don't know if you've been following this like big roundtable thing that happened where all of these healthcare providers and wellness people came in and they did a roundtable about like the food dyes in our children's food. I don't know if you've been seeing those videos. They're going everywhere. But someone said something that I was like, that is such a good point. He said that like the problem with our system right now is that we operate from a safe until proven guilty, or innocent until proven guilty, or safe until proven harmful method. So in the US, like 5G was deployed before we ever had any long-term studies. Like we didn't know what that was going to do. We're like, did a couple hour-long studies and we're like, yeah, we're good. Put it up everywhere, no hesitation. And now we're part of that experiment. And cigarettes is a really good example. Artificial food dyes is a really good example, just because that's a huge one right now that people are fighting against. Like, hey, there is really clear long-term studies now. We know that this is harmful. Why aren't we doing anything about it? And they were talking about that of like the US's approach things is like, oh, okay, this could be potentially harmful, but until we know for sure that it's harmful, we're going to just let it play out. Other countries that have banned over, multiple of thousands of ingredients that we allow in our food, they are guilty until proven innocent. If we think this might be harmful, we are not going to implement it until it has gone through a long-term study. And so a lot of those countries are the same countries that have more regulations around Wi-Fi and more like France banned the iPhone 12, which is the one that I have, because of the amount of EMF that it was emitting. So I really think that's a really good point, because we can point to so many different things in history where we could say, oh, well, there's not enough research, so we're just going to blindly continue on, when there's clearly enough research to know that it's harmful. Like Dr. Kent Chamberlain, I have like a quote from him that's like, we don't need any more research to know that EMF is harmful. What we need more research on is the level of effective, like, what is the level of effect, and the research on how do we combat this? Like, what do we do moving forward? And what is the best way for us to go about this? Because we're going to continue to we're going to continue to evolve technologically. So we need to know the harms and we need to know how to mitigate them. But yeah, I was like, man, that's such a good point of like, we do always do that in the US. We do just kind of throw things out there and see how it goes. And so I think having common sense on this one is a really important thing. Yes, there are certain like straight up research papers that you're not going to find. But if you can find a research paper showing that it, pierces through the blood-brain barrier, and then you can find research that says, oh yeah, children's brains are actually like, I can't remember the exact amount, but way thinner. Their skulls are way thinner than the adults. Okay, well, we can probably assume, you know what I mean? Like, that isn't good.
100%. It's kind of like A plus B equals C.
Exactly. So, yeah. Like like at some point, we have to decide to use common sense and not just wait for that research result that says, oh yeah, just kidding. We've been causing cancer, or we've been doing this for the last couple of decades and we're just now acknowledging it.
Yeah, I think that's what's so crazy about America specifically, is it seems like in some ways, obviously, progressing is good, but it seems like we're so addicted to the fast pace, like snowball effect of progressing everything, that we become the guinea pigs. And that terrifies me. I mean, the fact that, so many things, even let's say Botox wasn't released to the public for like consumer use until I think the year 2000. So we're going to start seeing in maybe the next 10 years, a lot more long-term studies on those results of that. And then EMF, we are constantly rolling out I feel like by the time we have answers about like 1G, 2G, we're rolling out 5G, like you were saying. And but we probably won't even know what 5G does until we're on 9G, 10G. And that is what's scary.
That is scary.
It feels like we're progressing faster than we are progressing faster than research can keep up with. And I feel like so many people are not going to like my opinion, but sometimes I think the answer is like, we just need to slow down. Like we are, is maybe there is such thing as, in my opinion, like progressing too fast. And maybe we need to like let our research kind of keep up and just kind of get up to date, because we are becoming human guinea pigs, and we might not even know the results of some of the things we're doing until we are dead and our grandkids are experiencing them. And that terrifies me. It's crazy. So I kind of moving into like more personal, so people can connect with your experience with EMF and how you got into Aries and in general, Aries tech and like EMF protection in general. So how did you discover EMF, and like how did it impact your life?
Okay, so I feel like I have to go back pretty far for this, because I feel like you really have to understand. I think most of the time it's that people kind of change their relationship with health, and then at some point start peeking behind all of these curtains and find EMF. Like that's kind of what happened with me. So I like my health journey started because when I was like 17, I got my wisdom teeth removed and they left a fissure, which is like a hole connected to my nasal cavity, which is so gross. But I ended up getting like horrible sinus infections, ended up having like 6 rounds of antibiotics, steroids, surgery on my sinuses and all of the things, and nothing was working. And it really kind of came to like, okay, my mom was the one who was like, your doctor has not told you to stop eating sugar, to stop drinking alcohol at 17, because that's what that's what you do in the Central Texas. All of these things that just were never mentioned to me. It was always just more drugs. And so I ended up going on, which I don't know if I would have done this now, but that's what I did then, was on a completely raw food diet. So cut out sugar, dairy, everything, and went completely raw for 30 days and completely got rid of my sinus infection. And that's what kind of started my journey. And then I started like really questioning, like, okay, well, what else? Like what else could I do? And what else is like, did I not realize was having such a big impact on my health? What's so wild to me is that EMF was definitely on my radar. Like I had definitely been talked to about it. Like, cause I went and studied with a functional medicine doctor for a while, who also, he was like this very weird hybrid. He was a functional medicine doctor. He was actually on like the World's Medical Association, like the board who makes like all of the decisions for the, the medical systems like worldwide. But then he was also like a Native American medicine man, and he had also studied in Thailand for like 15 years. So he had a lot of like Thai medicine. And so I had went and I studied with him for a while, and I had heard of EMF. He had talked about EMF, but it was just one of those things where I think you even had said this on your podcast, where it's just so, or the one that we did, it's so easy to pay attention to the things where you can see those physical effects. You know what I mean? Like when I stopped eating sugar, I physically felt my sinuses clear up. Like, and those things are just easy to measure. And when you cut sugar out of your diet for so long, when you implement it back, you can tell that it has an effect on you. So the stuff that I went into my body, and then I got really into the stuff that went on my body, like my skin. You know, I learned that the skin is the largest organ. I know that's a huge thing for you as well with your skincare line and everything. So I really started paying attention. Like I wouldn't put things on my skin that like would be, I had to, you know, if I had to call it, toxic, whatever they're called, poison control. If my child got into it, then I wasn't going to use it. Then got into like cleaning products and all of those things, like started just transferring it out. And EMF was really one of the last things, just because it was so out of sight, out of mind. It was just like, there's so many other things to care about that, like, why care? You know, it just wasn't on my radar really, but I knew about it. What really put it on my radar was after my son was born. Because I was like eating all organic at the time. Like I had a very clean diet. And I had him at home, and then we ended up having to transfer to the hospital, and he ended up getting a surgery, and ended up having something called jejunal atresia, which was like a 1 in 2 million case. And we ended up being in the hospital for like 6 weeks while he recovered and all this. And when I asked the doctor, like, what happened, he basically was like, oh, this just happens. It's just like a slight gene thing that happens in the first couple weeks gestation. There's nothing could have done about it. And I'm careful on how I tell this story, because I don't want to shame mothers. Like I'm not saying that like I did something wrong, or like, you know, we always do something wrong when something like this occurs. But there, from my mind, was like, there was a biological thing that happened, and I want to understand why. And that's really how I started to come to EMF. And I'm not saying that that's what happened. I can never make that claim. I'll never be able to prove that. But in the first couple of weeks of my gestation, I was living in a 200 square foot apartment, and my Wi-Fi was plugged in my bedroom. So like I was sleeping with my Wi-Fi on in my bedroom every night. And guys, please, if you have a Wi-Fi in your child's bedroom, like I was sitting in the coffee shop the other day and listening to this old lady, like this older lady. She was like, oh, my daughter, she just got these Wi-Fi routers that go in every bedroom so that the connection's so good. And I'm like, do I say something to her or not? I'm not sure. Yeah. But yeah. So, and I'll never be able to prove that's what it was, but that is just what opened my eyes and made me a lot more aware. When I had kids, especially in that way, that was really, intense and like, okay, like I need to figure out environmental toxins and all of that. So I started doing a lot of different things. Unplugging our Wi-Fi at night, which is the first thing I would recommend to people. It's just, that's such an easy thing that you can do, is like, if you're not using your phone, put it on airplane mode. If if you're not using your Apple Watch, take it off. Honestly, just don't use one. Get wired headphones. Unplug your Wi-Fi at night is definitely the first step though. And so I started doing that. I got some like EMF baby blankets for my kids to wear when they're watching TV and all these things. And then I interviewed the CEO of Aries on my old podcast, Happy Needs Company, which I don't do anymore. And I just he wasn't the CEO at the time, but he became CEO shortly after. And he really broke down like the Aries product, which I had and was using. But it wasn't something that was like at the forefront of like me talking about it or anything like that. And once he kind of described like the background of Aries, he explained that it was Aries Tech was a foundation before. It was actually like a medical device, and they were hired by the military to create this medical device that would help people who are on those like movable radio signal towers that were having a lot of side effects from using those signal towers. So they needed to create something that would help mitigate the biological effects, but also allow for those frequencies to still communicate properly. And that was years and years of research before they ever turned it into a consumer product. So the person who, like the family who created all of that science, the foundation that created the science, it was his son who then came and made it a consumer product as Wi-Fi started going in homes, as iPhones started coming out, as smart devices started becoming more integrated into our world. It became clear that we needed a solution. And so that's when they started doing a consumer product. And I thought that was really important because you see so many of these EMF products that just kind of pop out of nowhere, and they're like these beautiful sticker that you put on your phone, and it's like supposed to, block everything. And it's like you go to their website and there's like maybe like 1 or 2 studies that were like third-party studies, and all of these things. And then they end up getting sued later down the line, and they end up having to say, like, there's a lot of that if you look into the past of EMF products. And so I totally get people's skepticism around the EMF stuff, because there's so many products that are just feeding off of people's fear of EMF, and they're not backed up by any legitimate science. So that was the other thing that I had to learn, was what is legitimate science? Because I didn't know. Like, I can see that they have studies, but I'm like, but what does this mean? So you have independent research, you have third-party research, and then you have your peer-reviewed and published. And you really want to look for the peer-reviewed and published, because what that means is that somebody who is an expert in that field has taken that research and broken it into pieces and like gave it a run for its money before approving it. And with third party is okay, but it's something that it can easily be bought and paid for. And peer review, you can't. I don't know. That's if you go back to all of the corruption that's happened, I don't really know. But supposedly it's supposed to be the standard of standards. And so that's really what you want to look for with any product, not even EMF, but any product. You want to make sure, okay, there's independent studies, that's cool. Third party, that's cool, but are there peer reviewed and published articles? Because journals don't want to take that risk. They don't integral journals don't want to publish about research that is not credible. So they are going to put it to the test and make sure that it's credible before they publish it in their journals. And that's what I was talking about with Dr. Kent. When he went through all of those research, he also goes through all of the journals, and he gets to know the journals that published that research. And what he found out was that a lot of the publications that had published that EMF was completely safe were publications that were directly correlated with telecommunication companies. And so he was like, oh, okay. So actually the majority of the studies that were done that show that it's harmful are done by very integral journals that aren't bought and paid for. So the journal is also important. Peer review is important. And the journal is also important that does the peer review and making sure that they, are credible.
Yeah, that is,
long answers for you. I'm sorry.
No, I love it, because I want to go in depth on this, and it is pretty crazy. The more you dive into who's doing studies, I see it a lot in food as well. Like when you look at studies on what's good, what's bad, oftentimes you're going to see that those studies are very much bought out. And you have to start being curious, and you have to start being your own investigator when it comes to health things, because ultimately, I was talking about this in another episode recently, how nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's going to advocate for you like you. And if you want to find the truth, you have to get curious and start digging into the truth. And so many people want to be able to trust what's being put out there, but you have to get curious, because ultimately people will take advantage of that trust and they'll make a profit off of it. So with Aries Tech, one thing that really drew me to it is the fact that it has so much research. It has, more than any other company I've seen a lot of EMF blocking and harmonizing companies out there. So what's the difference between Aries Tech and an EMF blocker?
Okay, I love that question. And I didn't even really get to why but you kind of got the gist of why I chose Aries after all of that. But okay, blocking EMF, you might look up EMF blockers and you might find Faraday cages. So you'll have the Faraday cage that goes over your Wi-Fi router. It looks like this metal cage. You have the Faraday blocking thing, little envelopes that you can put your smart devices inside of that will completely block transmission. And then you have the iPhone cases that say they block transmission, which is very suspect, because it's really energy can't be created or destroyed. So it has to come somewhere. So a lot of people who are hypersensitive, who have the actual blocking cases on their phone, have noticed an increase in their sensitivity just because it finds its way out. So it'll be at the very bottom of the phone is getting super hot because it's pushing energy out from the bottom of the phone. But the real basic difference is that Faraday cages and all of that, they're meant to block signals from being able to move through. So the Faraday cages that you put on your Wi-Fi, a lot of people will say it affects the speed of their Wi-Fi. Yeah, it is going to affect the speed of your Wi-Fi because it's slowing those signals down and blocking a lot of them from being able to move through. The difference between that and what Aries does, and I have one on here, is these are not blocking, we call diffusing or modulating, but it's basically taking those surrounding frequencies, and it's fed by EMF, really. So it's powered by EMF. A lot of people will ask, does it need to be plugged in? How long does it last? All of that. It's like a credit card. Like, it doesn't work until you swipe it on the credit card reader. It is powered by surrounding EMF, and we have EMF everywhere. Even if you had all of your Wi-Fi turned off and your phones turned off, we have EMF. Our bodies have, a small electromagnetic field, or the frequency that we emit, I think, is similar to that of the Earth, which is like 7 megahertz. It's very, very, or 7 hertz even. So it's very, very minute. But anyway, so it will even, like, if you don't have any electronics around you, it will even filter your own electromagnetic field, which is really cool. And I can't say a whole lot about that, but there's some really awesome research that they're doing about the effects of, like, on our biology without even technology involved, which is really cool. But basically what it does is it takes that surrounding EMF and it kind of sends it on this journey to help, like, make it less chaotic, more coherent, and more bioavailable. So it's not blocking EMF, and you're not going to be able to read it with an EMF reader because the EMF reader doesn't have the capacity of wavelengths. Like, it can't measure all the different wavelengths that are being dispersed and diffused. So it's taking those frequencies surrounding that are really chaotic, man-made frequencies, it's sending it on that pattern, and it's creating something that's a little bit more coherent and a little bit more bioavailable to our bodies. And you can see that in, like, EEGs and heart rate monitors. Even if you have, like, a heart rate monitor, or like you have, like, the HRV, thing on your phone or whatever, a lot of people have noticed an increase in their heart rate variability, which is really a good sign when they've had incorporated Aries tech. And then you'll see the EEGs, like people's reaction, like their brain reacting to being on the phone for 10 minutes and then being on the phone for 10 minutes with an Aries device, and their baseline brain function is almost better than their baseline before they ever even got on the phone. So it's really, really interesting. And we have even more research happening with it, which is super fun. And I cannot wait until we can talk about it. But it's probably going to be a long thing. But yeah, at the end, I think that's what's so cool, is that it really is like a medical device. And I think that had they gone a different direction, they could have totally not even had it as, like, the EMF aspect of it is just like a bonus part of it. Having it on you is like filtering your own, biotropic field, which is even cool just on its own.
Wow. Okay. When that research comes out, I want to have you
right?
back on
I'm
to talk about it.
Even talk about the fact that there's research happening. I don't even know.
Well,
I'll tell you later. We got to take it out. No.
Yeah, let me know. But yeah, when it does come out, I will definitely want to chat about it more. And it's really fascinating. I know I've obviously seen, like, really insane effects of using Aries tech, and I've used other EMF, like, blockers in the past, not really knowing. And they did nothing for me. And now, even something I talk about a lot is people always come over, and the number one thing that people tell me when they visit my home is it feels super, super calming. And they're like, it's like a spa. And I'm not doing anything crazy. I mean, we don't have a ton of tech. I'm like, really, I did not go for the Alexa or any of the in-home whatever. Keep the TV unplugged, like, try to do things. But really, ultimately, I think it's the fact that we have Life Tunes in every room. We have them on our devices. I keep one right next to like a Life Tune Max or Zone Max, right next to my Wi-Fi router. I mean, just those little things, people feel the difference. And I get that feedback a lot. So it's something that I really personally connect to and really like. Can we actually walk through the different EMF modulators Aries has, and, like, so people can kind of figure out what would be the best for them?
Hopefully I get the feet protection right. So there's a couple different ones, and I have so many questions because, like, I monitor a lot of, like, the incoming, like, requests and stuff about the products. But we have the Life Tune one, which goes on all of, like, you want to put it on all of your most used electronic devices. So, like, your computer, if you're, like, for me, I work on my computer pretty much every day, all day. My phone has one. If you, like, have an iPad or tablet, It's hard to put one like on a smartwatch or AirPods, but I'll get to a solution for that in a second. But the LifeTune One is really designed to modulate frequencies from that particular device. So people have asked, like, well, if I have my phone on me, will it help protect me since it has like a wider range of protection? I think it has like a 19-foot range of protection. It will do a level of protection, but it's mostly going to hone in on the frequencies that are being emitted from your phone. So if you like are out in the city and you're walking through the city with 5G towers everywhere and Wi-Fi routers everywhere, you really do want to have an extra level of protection. So I always recommend like get the ones like for your phone or for the things that you use the most, your phone and computer. Or if you have a kid who uses like VR headsets or like things like that, or tablets and things like that, definitely get them for your kids. And then a step above that is the LifeTune Go. And so the LifeTune Go is like similar to the Flex, which is what I have on, but it's a slightly smaller size pendant. And it has a 32-foot range of diameter. So it's like 10 foot less than I like this one because of being a mom and like my kids are around. I just feel like, okay, they're also getting a level of protection. A lot of the research that's coming is on this one just because it is one of our most popular products. But the Go is really designed for children and for pets. That's what it was originally designed for, was for pets actually. So I have them on my kids' backpacks and lunch boxes. So like if they go, when they go to school, it's like, okay, well, there's going to be a 32-foot range of protection there. So they're also going to be providing protection for their classroom and stuff like that. You can put it on your keychains if you do like an electric car, or if you have a car with a lot of like computer, like mine has like just a giant computer in it. So I have a LifeTune Go on my car keys. And then there's the LifeTune Flex, which is the one that I'm wearing, which has a 42-foot range of protection. And this is the most popular one for like adults and athletes, especially. We have a huge, we call them the Aries athletes, but a huge customer base of athletes who are looking to, optimize their performance. And the LifeTune Flex is the most popular for that. It also has like a protective coating on the outside. So it's durable, but I still wouldn't wear it in the sauna. I get a lot of requests on that because it's just too much heat. Don't wear it in the sauna. And then the LifeTune Zone, which is what you have in your little by your desk or on your desk, is really good for like office spaces, for your bedroom, things like that, like smaller spaces where you're working or you're going to be for long periods of time. If you have a game room, like you might want to put a LifeTune Zone in there. But that has I can't remember the range of protection on that one because I think the Zone Max is the 92-foot. But somewhere between there, it's kind of like that in-between space between the Flex and the Zone Max. And then the Zone Max is for like the larger spaces. So that's the one I always like directly recommend for anybody who has a large household. If they have like 5 kids and they have, an Alexa and they have Wi-Fi routers in both rooms and all the things, is like get a couple Zone Maxes. It has a really high range of protection. So it's like super large protective space, and like put it in. No, okay, sorry. Zone Max is 139 foot.
Whoa.
And the Zone is 93 foot. Yeah, I'm like, wait, okay, it just hit me. I had to do a blog on this the other day. Sorry, I'm really bad with numbers, you guys.
No, I'm impressed that you remembered all these. I'm really impressed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
So the zone is like 90, 93, and then the Zone Max is like over 130 foot range of protection. So that one is like for large open spaces. So like for your living rooms, your playrooms, things like that. And then people ask about like, it piercing through walls and like, will it protect? It will, but just like Wi-Fi, like the more barriers that you have in place, the harder it's going to be for it to work. So you want to put it in more open spaces. You want to like, if I had someone ask if she's wearing the Zone, if she's wearing the Flex in the other room, will it protect her kids in their room? And I'm like, just get something for their room. I mean, because there's like all the wall barriers and all of that stuff. I'm not saying it won't benefit, but I'd rather it be like right there, like right there and working with what's in that space. So yeah, that's all of the products. And the Flex comes with like a necklace now. The Go comes with like a little keychain for your like keys and stuff. And then you can also get like mounts for the Zone Max, and you can get a mount for the Zone like she has there. And yeah, we have a ton of holidays. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but we have a ton of really good holiday sales coming up for like leading into Black Friday and stuff.
Amazing. Yeah, this is coming out mid-November, so perfect timing.
Perfect.
Right before
Yeah.
Thanksgiving. Oh, and you guys will definitely be hearing from me because I'm obsessed with Aries tech and actually
You've
even
just been
started.
such a great advocate and like
Oh,
so
thank you.
consistently sharing. I feel like people like you are so important. That's actually how I started. I didn't finish that part of my story, but I started as an affiliate. So like I had really learned about EMF, decided it was something I cared about, learned about Aries, interviewed Josh Bruno, who's the CEO, really like just was like, okay, this company is legit. Started to like look into research, figured out, okay, I kind of understand what legitimate research, needs to be. And then I started doing affiliations with them, and just talking about that as a solution because I was talking about the problem so much, and I was just so passionate about it that I just kept being, wait, I want to do more with you guys. I want to do more because I just kept falling. I did not expect, guys, I did not expect my journey to lead me to being like an EMF advocate or talking about that at all. But it's just one of those things where I realized like, if you educate yourself on food, you can make the choice about food. If you educate yourself, on medications or food dyes or like whatever it is, in environmental toxins, on weed killers, all of this stuff that once you educate yourself on, you get to make the choice. I don't have to use this. I don't have to buy this. I don't have to let my kids eat this. With EMF, it became such a really important topic for me because I realized that we didn't get the choice. Like while during COVID, when we were fighting about all the other things that were causing health crises, um, 5G was deployed and we did not get the choice. And so now it's something that we have to contend with every day and have to learn how to help our bodies adapt. And that's what I love about Aries is that, okay, we can't hide from it. We're not gonna be able to just like put ourselves in a Faraday cage and like hide away from the world. But we can help our bodies, give out our bodies that natural boost to contend with it all.
Yeah, and I think even beyond the physiological impacts, the mental health impacts of knowing you're protecting yourself from EMF is also incredible because once you become aware of the impact of EMF, I feel like for a while I was really stressing about it and really anxious about it when I realized that we were seeing such a sharp increase in tumors in young people. We're seeing, I was experiencing a lot of anxiety and jitters and
Yeah.
insomnia, mold reactivity, and I think mentally it kind of threw me for a loop. And even like it's really interesting, but I feel like there's a level of physiologically I feel EMF, but there's also like a psychosomatic level where I just know that it's harming me, where I feel like sometimes I would feel EMF like in my belly, like by my uterus. And I think there's part of it knowing that like I don't know how much of it is literally physiological and how much is that connection between me understanding what that's going to do. Like
Yes,
so there's a level where like I just don't know if some of the stuff I'm feeling is psychosomatic because I understand the impact it has.
for
And the
sure.
mental
I
health,
feel the
yeah.
same way.
Yeah, it's like the mental health component of knowing you're doing the best thing to protect yourself from EMF. Like even beyond the physical, you will sleep better at night because you will have less anxiety. And that
Yeah.
like it's it's both physical, like less anxiety because your body is getting out of fight or flight and you're letting your cells relax. And it's also less anxiety because you're doing the best thing for your body and mitigating some of the harm caused. So
Yeah.
it comes together, it marries together really beautifully. I wanted to backtrack because I forgot to ask you this like 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
Or I guess just to cover it. So like HRV, I don't think a lot of people know what it is, but I've been really interested in it because I know it's like the gold standard of measuring your success as a biohacker. So could you explain a little bit like what HRV is? That way just people can understand how EMF modulators like Aries Tech could improve it.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny because I was literally trying to understand what heart rate variability was the other day. But who is a really good person at explaining this and who really was bringing this to the forefront of Aries is Ben Greenfield, who's like one of the
Mhm.
top biohackers in the world. But it basically stands for heart rate variability, and you actually might know more about it than I do because whenever I was looking into the research, I'm like, okay, so it shows a positive increase in is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Like trying to understand. But I think it's just like the way that our heart rate can adapt to the stressors around our body,
Mhm.
that are environmental stressors. So what the results that they're seeing, and this is like me, not a scientist, just like from what I'm learning, is that our heart rate is able to adapt to our environmental stressors faster and better when we have the Aries products near us.
Yeah.
But
No,
you actually might be able to explain it better.
that's a really good explanation. And yeah, and there's just essentially, I guess, like for just really basic level, as we're all kind of learning more and more, fight or flight is this state where it's like you're being chased by a tiger in the jungle. And,
Yes.
back in the beginning of humanity, when we were living more in the wild, that was a real thing. So you basically want to be able to shift between the parasympathetic, rest and digest, where your body's healing, regenerating, like digesting, into sympathetic, which is that stress state, which is not in and of itself a bad thing. Like some stress, like some eustress is good. You would want to be able to shift from resting, chilling to running from a tiger. But then when that's over, you want to get back into that sympathetic. With all the stress from work, social media, technology, EMF, which does cause a lot of stress on our cells, all these different things, over exercising, diet, the list literally goes on. We're staying in that sympathetic, being chased by a tiger in the jungle. So now we're not shifting between the two. So if your baseline is low, if you have a low variability, that means your body is like staying stressed. So to have a high variability, it means you're shifting from that parasympathetic into that sympathetic. So you're seeing like a wide range of your heart. Thank you. So it's a very fine tune. I've been learning more about it because as someone who's kind of, sharing my journey with biohacking, that's like the gold standard. And I really want to get more into it. But it's basically you want to be able to have a big variability between your baseline and your high stress, because that means you're able to shift back and forth between rest and digest. And I'm being chased by a tiger. So
I love that.
Which I think
love that. I literally am just like, I literally just had the same revelation like this week of like, okay, I really want to because that really just started coming up more and more because Ben Greenfield had talked about his heart rate variability. And then we've seen a lot of customers talking about it. And I'm like, I want to understand more about what this means because I understand the EEG stuff a lot better, but that was a great explanation. I love that. And I love that, like, because what you were saying earlier about just knowing like the anxiety in your head and knowing that when you have something that like the best thing that's around and you're doing the right thing, like that brain can't tell the difference. That part of your brain can't tell the difference between your own thoughts and what's actually happening in reality. So like if you are, driving down the road and all of a sudden you're thinking about the bills that need to be paid, or you're thinking about EMF, or you're thinking about all these things, your heart rate's going to respond to that as if a tiger is chasing you. Yeah. I remember learning that like way back, just because I love that you said that, because I used to literally tell myself a tiger is not chasing me right now. I am safe. Like there's nothing behind me, because your brain can literally not tell the difference between a thought and what is actually happening in your environment. So even having that ease of thought is really really important thing.
Yeah, it's super connected. And it's so true. Sometimes you literally have to tell yourself. It's kind of off topic, I guess.
Yeah, it's totally off topic.
Off and on. Same thing, like not that long ago, maybe a couple months ago. It was so profound. I was just learning about getting, working on getting into parasympathetic with using different things, Aries Tech being one of them. And I like ran into a situation that made me really stressed, but it was all in my head. Like I ran into someone I really didn't want to see, and I felt my heart rate just spike. And I was like, I get jittery, shaky, and and I'm in the nail salon. So I'm sitting there like, which I don't recommend getting your nails done all the time. It is one thing in my 80-20 that I sometimes do. But I literally was like in my head, like, you're safe. You're not under attack. No one's chasing you. And immediately felt my heart rate just like slide down. Yeah. And the physiological impact of just telling yourself that you're okay is huge. So when you're doing something like protecting yourself against EMF, if you're someone like me who stresses out about those things, just that knowledge and being able to tell yourself it's okay because you're doing what you need to do can be really impactful for your mental health and therefore your physical health, because your mind can directly affect your health. The number one immune killer is stress. And if you're stressed in your brain, your heart rate variability is not going to get better because you are constantly feeding your body these cognitive distortions. So
yeah. And to just take that step further, I think a really good thing to say here that I haven't said yet is, and just like a simple point when people are asking like, how is EMF affecting us? Because everything has EMF and, all the things other than the exponential increase of wavelengths and all of that. Our bodies are like electrical beings. Dr. Rusty Turner, I did an episode with him. He's a neuroscientist, a pediatric neuroscientist, and he's been kind of studying, like he's been in the field for over 40 years, and he's been studying kind of this these differences in EEGs as time goes on in children, and really trying to figure out what's going on. And that's really how he came into EMF. But he was like, on a very basic level, we all learn when we're in school to become a neuroscientist, we learn that our body is electrical. And it's wild that none of us make that connection, that if our body's electrical and we rely on these electrical signals to move our arm up and down and to turn genes on and off and, to do all of these things, it would make sense that these outside frequencies that are far different than what our body is used to and what our body uses to communicate would disrupt those communications and would cause a little bit of chaos. Like, we are literally being bombarded with a form of communication, but that our body doesn't really recognize and is responding to it as a stressor. So even on that fundamental level, like, the Aries device makes sense in the way that it kind of modulates or diffuses those frequencies to be more bioavailable, that communication would even allow for the heart rate variability to increase. So that's my own understanding of it, but that's super interesting. And I'm really excited to see like more of what they plan to do, especially as like the athlete thing kind of comes into play, because more and more athletes are turning to Aries. And that was really like the UFC partnership that we did, and all of these, Aries athletes that we have, that wasn't like us seeking that out. It wasn't like, oh, well, we want to be number one in the athletic, that was out of like seeing our consumers and like noticing the consumer, like the customer base that we had, and realizing that the customer base is heavily athletes. And that's what kind of led into this Aries athlete thing. And a lot of new research is kind of like coming ahead now because of that, but it's really exciting.
It is exciting. And I think athletes know better than anyone else how important recovery is. So if all the athletes are doing this and it's helping them recover better and perform better, they are onto something. And it's not just for the athletes. Like, if they're doing something, I hope that regular people like you and me can see that and be like, oh, like, these people know what's up, because recovery is paramount to our health. This constant do, go is not doing us any favor. Recovery needs to happen in there, and Aries Tech is a great way to get you there. Okay, so I'm hoping that after listening to this, everybody decides to protect themselves with some Aries Tech modulators. But on top of that, like, what are some best practices for living in this world with EMF, like being part of the world, but maybe reducing some of that stress on our bodies?
For sure. Okay, so one that I actually didn't realize, I totally thought the opposite, and Dr. Kent Chamberlain kind of explained to me why, but one thing you definitely want to do is actually use your Wi-Fi instead of connecting to a cell tower when you're in your home, because he basically was like, okay, when your phone, like, you want to think about the power, because you're touching it and like you have your phone in your hand, you really want to be thinking about like the power that's being emitted and the strength that it's having to use in order to like get a signal. So if you're not using your Wi-Fi, it's going to use more power to try to find a signal at your nearest cell tower. And that's going to be more detrimental. So he was like, be sure. And I was like, I don't know why. I just didn't really think that you would want to use your Wi-Fi. I mean, obviously the best practice would be to connect Ethernet. A lot of people are going that route now. A lot of people are kind of being like, buy Wi-Fi, because Ethernet even works a lot better in most cases. But Ethernet is basically like the old school cords that go through your walls, and you connect your computer with a little plug, and then you're getting Wi-Fi straight from those wirings rather than through like, the wireless signals. So that's like best case. But just unplugging your Wi-Fi at night when you're not using it, unplugging like, any smart Alexas or smart devices that you have that you can't unplug. I know a lot of people have like smart fridges now that you can't technically unplug. Another really one little thing that I think really is important is just like pulling your bed away from your wall a little bit. If you have like electrical, like things plugged in under your bed, even if it's not Wi-Fi, dirty electricity can also play a big role. And so if your bed is like literally right up against the wall, all you need is literally a couple inches before that dirty electricity starts to lose its like effectiveness. So like just moving your bed out from the wall, keeping Wi-Fi out of children's bedrooms. I just think that's a really important one. I get a lot of messages about that. Turning your phone on airplane mode when you're not using it. Don't use your phone or your computer when it's plugged in, because that's also generating a lot of more power. And then, like when you're out and about is really where Aries comes into play, because you don't have as much control. So, having something to help you kind of adapt to the surrounding frequencies that we can't control, either the cell towers and the Wi-Fi's and all that stuff that we love and we're grateful for in a lot of ways. But we definitely could use a little bit of protection there. What else am I not thinking of? I also I'm a huge advocate of like doing everything that you can. I do, like I said earlier, I have like these little EMF blocker blankets that because I know that you can't like block, like you can't stop frequencies, but you can kind of like disperse that. So I have this little baby blanket that I put over my child's like largest organs whenever they're watching like with an iPad or a computer or something like that, just to protect their large organs. And they're just like, it's like basically like a silver, it's like a little blanket that's made from like a silver fabric. So I think knowing when to block, knowing when to turn off, knowing when to modulate is important. Like it's not a one-all fix-all thing. I think I think Aries is a super, super important tool and a super important part of this, because we aren't going to be able to just shut off EMF completely. There's no way out of this world that we're in right now. And I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. If anything, it's going to continue on forward. So having something is so important because we can't just hide away. But anything that you can do at home, like they have off switches where you can literally do a switch right next to your bed and it'll turn off all your electrical devices outside of like your fridge, whatever you don't have plugged it, like attached to that, it'll turn it off. So there are a lot of really cool things. Just make sure you're looking at the research. For something like that, it doesn't require as much research because it's just shutting everything off. So it's like, that's good. We want to shut everything off. But yeah, just, keeping keeping laptops away from, like, don't put it on your lap. That was what you were saying about your I swear, if I have a laptop on on my lap, I could feel my ovaries like literally tingling. And then distance is really great. Like if you can get distance, if your kid's watching on a computer, iPad, like just get it away from their body. And last one that is actually a really nice tip is if you're going to go on like road trips or something like that, pre-download all of the movies. Like if you're going to let your kid watch on an iPad or something like that, instead of connecting like with cellular connection, and do this at home too, instead of connecting like through Wi-Fi or cellular connection, download the movie and then turn the iPad on airplane mode so that they're not actually using wireless connection in order to watch the movie. So like just a really simple tool. We actually just opted into getting like little DVD players, so that we're not having to do like Bluetooth or wireless or anything like that. But yeah, a couple things. I'm sure there's so many more, but
Well, that's amazing. I think that gives people a really good place to start. And yeah, I love that even a lot of streaming services, if you download the app, like I know Hulu and Netflix both do this, you can download your shows and movies for a lot of the shows and movies.
Yeah.
And then on planes. Yeah. So like they're making it easier and easier to actually do that. You can do it directly from your streaming services and just have it on your phone. So I love that there are so many amazing options. For those of you guys listening, if you are sold on Aries Tech, I will make sure to put a discount code and a link in the show notes so that you guys can shop it. Michaela, can you share with me, what are some of your personal wellness goals that you are doing and how are you getting there?
That's a really good question. Honestly, right now, my personal goals revolve around my kids a lot. I know that's kind of like a cop out because we do that as mothers, but I think like getting them really aligned with like our eating habits, like with me and my husband, like we pretty much do like meat and vegetables and I don't want to like take away their childhood, but I do really want to get them like kind of just more aligned with like sitting and eating with us rather than we're big snackers. Like in the family, we've been big snackers, and I kind of totally like raise my kids like that. So even though we eat all organic and we don't have artificial dyes in our home and all the things, they still do kind of eat like that, like the snacker life is the life that I have always lived. So I've been personally transitioning that, like me and my husband have, into like full meals and stuff like that. And then we're trying to kind of transition our kids now too, which is a little bit harder. And then just like moving my body every day. I mean, you ebb and flow. Like I used to be so adamant about my health, everything, like exercise, diet, everything was so on point. And like with work and with kids and with everything, I've just had to have a lot of like compassion. Where is that coming from? On myself, and I've kind of lost my way, and now I'm kind of like finding my way back. So like daily movement, eating whole meals, not just like grabbing an apple on my way outside, like that kind of thing. And being mindful, like even with having Aries and all the things, I still try to remove myself from my technology every so often because I work so many hours and like go sit outside, put my feet on the earth, all the things. But yeah, so I think just kind of it's just with kids and work, it's I mean, not a cop out and not an excuse. I definitely am like, I need to take control of my health, but I have definitely lost my way many times and had to find my way back.
Yeah. Well, that's life. I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
you're going to be on it. Sometimes you face a season that is a little bit harder, but it's beautiful that you can find your way back. And just wellness and reaching for your goals can mean something different in every season. It can shift. And I love that. I love that you're bringing your kids into your journey and they get to see that and have that example.
The other thing we've been really trying to get locked in, because we've had a lot of people come on the Way Forward podcast to talk about that, because it plays a really significant role in our relationship with technology and EMF and all the things. So trying to get up, get the sunrise in, get my feet, on the earth, just little things that I feel like do play a huge role in how I get through my day.
Beautiful. Well, I love to see that you are not only preaching the word, but you're living it too. And that is ultimately something that I love finding people who are truly passionate about all the different spheres of health. And I love that you really do show that. Aries Tech shows that. And it's a great pleasure to learn from you and to chat with you today. Can you plug where people can find you, the Way Forward, Aries, like all the different things?
Yes. Okay. So if you want to find my personal account, it's Michaela Z Wilson. It's like Michael with an A, Z Wilson. And then I manage the Wave Forward blog and I host the podcast. So it's just the Wave Forward, WAVE, not the way, but the Wave, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all your podcast streaming platforms. And then if you want to check out the blog, where we do a lot of we really try to stay unbiased and just give you factual information on what's going on with EMF. We really want to provide a resource for people who just need, who maybe you can't get an Aries product right now, but you really want to just know how you can do little basic things like what we talked about today to help mitigate risks in your household and just to start somewhere. Wave.ariestech.com is a blog where we are really committed to bringing you the most relevant information. And then ariestech.com is where you can shop all of the Aries Tech products if you choose to grab one for yourself and your family.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And you guys, if you haven't listened to the Wave Forward podcast, go check out my interview on their show and show some reciprocity there. And if you guys learned something from this episode, if you enjoyed it, please leave us a review. Please screenshot it, share it to your story, tag Michaela, tag Aries, tag me. It really does help us grow as small businesses and as newer podcasts. And I hope you guys had a great time listening to this episode and you learned something valuable to take home with you into your day-to-day. Michaela, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It was so fun.
So fun.